popular Netflix drama about the life of Queen Elizabeth II is historical fiction. The question is, how much is fact and how much is fiction? Today, I am going to show you top 10 Netflix's The Crown got it right and wrong. Before the video begins, please give it a like, and if you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin. 10. Elizabeth's visit to Ghana wasn't nearly as pivotal as depicted. In the early 1960s, Queen Elizabeth II paid a visit to Ghana. Newly independent, Ghana was being courted by the Soviet Union and therefore vulnerable to falling prey to communism. In The Crown, the Queen shares a charming ballroom dance with Ghana's president Kwame Nkrumah. So charming, in fact, that Nkrumah decides to rebuff Soviet overtures and remain within the orbit of the British Commonwealth. But The Crown doesn't mention the other facts that may have influenced Ghana's decision to remain in the Commonwealth, including the subsequent overthrow of Nkrumah's government. 9. The Crown leaves out the fact that Philip had a Jewish mentor. It's unclear why this detail was left out of The Crown, especially since there's some suggestion in the series that Philip's family had ties to the Nazi Party. But the truth is that Philip's mentor, Kurt Hahn, the man who founded Gordonstown, the Scottish boarding school that Philip attended, was a German-born Jew who opposed and fled the Nazis. Also left out of The Crown is the tremendous influence Hahn had over education in general. Gordonstown inspired the creation of many schools around the world, and Hahn co-founded Outward Bound. Don't miss these 23 rarely seen photos of the British royal family. 8. Prince Philip wasn't blamed for the death of his sister, Cecily. The Crown implies that Philip's misbehavior at boarding school led his sister, Cecily, to get on the plane that killed her and her entire family in 1937. That's not really what happened, however, according to Vickers. First, the supposed bad behavior, a fistfight, never happened, and more importantly, Cecily had planned on getting on the plane regardless of anything that was going on with her brother. 7. Queen Elizabeth did not refuse her sister's request to marry. Much is made in The Crown of Queen Elizabeth II's refusal to allow her sister, Princess Margaret, to marry Peter Townsend, including the Queen's warning to Margaret that any such marriage would result in Margaret being shunned from the family. In real life, Elizabeth had been so keen on making sure her sister was happy that she had gone so far as to draw up papers that would permit Margaret to retain her royal title upon her marriage to Townsend, according to the BBC. So why didn't the marriage happen? The relationship had simply run its course. 6. As tragic as it was, the fog wasn't a political crisis. Yes, the peace super was less of a political crisis than The Crown makes out. So a dose of Venetia Scott adds tragedy to what was otherwise a devastating but undramatic event. This much is true. In 1952, a perfect storm of circumstances came together that caused London to be covered in a thick blanket of poisonous smog, and around 4,000 people died as a result. So when The Crown depicted the horrors of the fog, it wasn't taking liberties. Liberties were taken, however, in the show's depiction of the resulting political upheaval, including Her Majesty's displeasure with Winston Churchill's handling of it, to the point where Elizabeth was considering asking for Churchill's resignation. In fact, there was no such upheaval. Of course, The Crown isn't the only production guilty of doing things like this. 5. The tragic Venetia Scott didn't actually exist. In the show, Winston Churchill's starstruck secretary Venetia Scott is mowed down by a bus as she hurries to Downing Street with an urgent message. Her death spurs the Prime Minister to put the Clean Air Act in motion. But was that really the case back in the 1950s? Did Venetia Scott actually exist? Well, no. The earnest secretary who memorizes Churchill's autobiography and struggles through the smog to work is actually one of The Crown's few invented characters. Her life and death are both fictional. The Great Smog itself was certainly a real event, though. London was enveloped in a blanket of thick, poisonous smog for several days, leading to thousands of deaths and overburdening hospitals. 4. The truth behind the drama. Obsessed with The Crown? You're certainly not alone. This historical dramatization of the reign of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has been watched by 73 million households worldwide since it first aired on Netflix in 2016, according to the BBC. Its popularity has grown with each season, and a 5th season is planned, although it isn't expected to air until 2022. As beloved as it is, however, it must be remembered that The Crown is fiction. Historical fiction, but fiction nonetheless. Historians, including unofficial but highly regarded royal biographers Sally Bedell-Smith and Hugo Vickers, have expressed concerns over the show's not quite on-the-mark depiction of various events and circumstances. And while the Queen's communications secretary told the New York Times that the royal family has no comment on The Crown and didn't say whether they even watched it, credible reports support that the Queen watched the first season, and though she really liked it, she had concerns that some of it had been too heavily dramatized. 3. King George VI wasn't sick yet in 1947. The Crown opens in 1947 with King George VI, Queen Elizabeth II's father, coughing up blood. However, in real life, King George VI, who died of lung cancer in 1952, was not yet ill in 1947. It wasn't until a year later that George VI began to suffer from leg pain. Doctors diagnosed a circulatory blockage and performed surgery for that, and his lung cancer wasn't diagnosed until 1951. 2. Princess Margaret's interest in her differently abled cousins was a plot device. The episode of Season 4 called The Hereditary Principle was meant to bring to light a little-talked-about shadow on the royal family, the existence of mentally disabled cousins who were hidden away in an institution. However, Vickers roundly disputes that the events depicted in the scripted drama had any basis in reality, with the exception that 2 cousins were born with a developmental disorder and cared for in an institution. Among the factual inconsistencies, Princess Margaret never visited the cousins, and the cousins were not kept a secret. The cousins' story was told in a 1987 documentary that film critic John Crace panned for rehashing what was essentially non-news in a way that seemed intended to paint the royal family in a negative light. 1. King Edward VIII was deeper in with the Nazis than the series depicted. Season 2's 6th episode, Vergangenheit, spends quite a bit of time addressing that the Duke of Windsor, formerly King Edward VIII, who abdicated in 1936 after less than a year on the throne, was a Nazi sympathizer. Ultimately, the episode has the Queen accusing the Duke, among other things, of having entertained discussions with the Nazis regarding a deal to get the Duke back on the throne with his wife, Wallis, by his side. Historians, including Vickers, don't dispute that this conversation may have occurred or that documentation exists to suggest the veracity of such claims. But The Crown shows the Duke attempting to minimize the significance of these missteps, which he appears to categorize as merely diplomatic in nature. In truth, it appears the Duke of Windsor's links to the Nazi Party may have been more than mere diplomatic dallying. In real life, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor appear to have been close personal friends with several Nazi officers. The Duchess may have had a romantic relationship with a high-ranking Nazi officer, and the Duke was observed giving the full Nazi salute to various party members during a 1937 trip to Germany. Biography also reported that during his lifetime, the Duke was heard saying that Hitler was not such a bad chap, and blaming Jews for causing World War II. Thank you for watching, and please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and enable post alerts to view more of our future videos. After saying that, keep watching our videos, and I'll speak with you in the next one.